Welcome to this episode. This is the first one that we do in English. My name is Terje Alnes and I run the Spartacus.no website and this YouTube channel. In this episode, we take a look on how Belarus view the Western media coverage of the country, Norway's policy towards Belarus, the sanctions, the war in Ukraine, and the situation with refugees from Belarus to Poland and Lithuania. Our special guest today is Yaraslau Martsinkevich, chargé d'affaires of Belarus to Sweden and Norway. Welcome, Mr. Martsinkevich.
Thank you, Mr. Alnes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Birkelund. I am glad to be here and participate in today's conversation.
Yeah, we can just go directly to the topics.
Yep.
Norway has this week introduced new sanctions against Belarus. These are the same as those imposed by the EU this summer. The sanctions are a reaction to the Belarusian role and involvement in Russia's warfare against Ukraine, according to the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So, Mr. Martsinkevich, what is your view on that, and how do the sanctions affect the economy of Belarus and daily life for Belarusians?
Belarus' position on the Western sanctions is clear. So they are unacceptable. And these unilateral coercive measures are illegal because they directly violate international law and the prerogative of the United Nations Security Council as the only institution authorized to make such decisions. Moreover, our country has proposed on the UN platform to consider the introduction of such illegal sanctions as an act of aggression and terrorism. We also strongly reject the false accusations that were used by the West as a pretext for yet another illegal restrictions against Belarus. The decision to impose sanctions was initially based on far-fetched assumptions about so-called involvement of Belarus in aggression. This accusation of Belarus are completely absurd. Thus, Western politicians are trying to shift their guilt for inciting the conflict. And we consider the West unilateral measures not only as a continuation of an unfriendly policy towards our country and another attempt at blatant interference in the internal affairs of sovereign state, but also as yet another element for unfair competition. Then assigning to themselves the exclusive right of the UN Security Council to impose sanctions is at least arrogant on the part of the West, and in particular Norway. But this is not only a mistake, I think. The very belief in the effectiveness of sanctions policy is such a mistaken. This ineffectiveness and futility of sanctions, the negative impact, including in the form of a boomerang on the initiators, such measures has long been proven in practice. Besides, it is obvious for all unengaged people that Europe suffers from sanctions against Belarus and Russia, while the USA wins at the expense of Europe. Answering for your question about effect for economy, I can say that despite this unprecedented sanctions pressure, Belarus continues to develop successfully. Our country is finding new markets, and we see an increase in export of Belarusian goods. For example, in July this year, our country became a member of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, whose members compose 1/3 of the world GDP. And as a result, the real incomes of Belarusians increased by 9.6% for during the first 6 months of this year, while the GDP of our country grew by 5% compared to the last period of last year. So I suppose that these figures speak for themselves.
So you say that the sanctions actually have failed?
Yes.
And also that the sanctions actually are illegal regarding to international law?
Yes, correctly.
Actually, I was in Minsk in late June, and I was kind of surprised that because I could use my Visa card there, because I thought that it was impossible to use a Visa card. But that worked well, so it struck me that maybe the sanctions on Belarus is not as harsh as those on Russia. Or what do you think about that?
I can say at all that at the same time, the consequences of these legal restrictions against Belarus are often sensitive for other countries.
Yeah.
I can add. Thus, the consequences of illegal blockade of Belarusian potash fertilizers, which is almost 1/3 of the world export, are felt everywhere, especially given the scale of undernourishment and hunger on the planet, so primarily in countries of the global south. So I can say that the number of sanctions that the West has imposed, it's a very large.
Yeah.
It's about it's thousands of measures that have been illegally imposed.
Yeah.
So,
More specifically, I want you to comment on this. I hope all the viewers can see what's on there. It's from September 2020, when Norway's Prime Minister said that we have to topple the president of Belarus, Lukashenko, and actually that was confirmed this week when Tsikhanovskaya was at Stortinget. So what I just want to you to comment on that policy. It's not, of course, something that the Norwegian Stortinget, it's not their initiative, but it comes from, of course, the USA and NATO and EU. But anyway, Norway is part of this I mean, very dangerous policy, I think.
Well, the West was not satisfied with the result of elections in 2020. Namely, the fact that it was not its puppets who came to power, who explicitly declared their intention to privatize state-owned companies and to get closer to the West up to NATO membership. That is why they tried once again to organize a color revolution. But the West failed because it did not take into account the resilience of Belarusian people and authorities. So Belarusians have made their choice in favor of peace, stability, and prosperity, I can say, and continue to follow an independent course. Yeah, we're aware of the statements of Ms. Solberg, as well as unfriendly steps of other Western politicians. I mean, it's obvious that such statements do not contribute in any way to the preservation of a positive image of the West in the eyes of Belarusians. And we consider such actions as attempts to interfere in internal affairs of Belarus, and which are immediately met with an adequate response from the Belarusian side. Yeah.
And what has been the Belarusian response? Can you tell me about that?
the response could be in different types of measures or countermeasures. It includes diplomatic, political, or even economic ones. So
Yeah.
So Belarus always react on all illegal measures imposed by Western countries.
I want to turn the attention a little bit about the refugee situation. It's like a large number of refugees and migrants have tried to cross the border from Belarus to Poland and other EU countries. And the Norwegian media, they claim that the initiative for the refugee crisis came directly from Belarus, probably came from President Lukashenko himself, who wanted to pressure the EU to ease the sanctions imposed after the presidential election in 2020. What is your comment on that claim?
Yeah, in fact, the general growth of migration flows reflects the catastrophic situation that has developed in the countries of the main outflow of refugees and migrants. This is the result of quasi-democratic activities of NATO and EU countries in these states. And at the same time, migrants come to Belarus only for transit on one of the routes to Western countries. That migration crisis that erupted in 2021 was used by the EU for unjustified illegal sanctions against Belarus. But our country offered the EU jointly efforts to resolve this crisis, but they were refused. From our part, we continue constructive interaction on these issues with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees and International Organization for Migration. And we are constantly working to stop the channels of illegal migration, and dozens of organizers and facilitators have been detained. Also, it is well known that international criminal groups are involved in this process of illegal migration. Most of such participants are citizens or residents of the EU countries themselves. And also, one can see some blatant cases with officials from some EU countries being involved in schemes to sell Schengen visas for illegal migration. I mean, the situation at the border clearly demonstrated that EU policy is a policy of double standards. While accusing Belarus, EU turns a blind eye on responsible policies and cruel and inhuman methods of its member states with regard to illegal migrants and refugees, despite criticism of international organizations. We are also aware about situation with illegal migrants on other EU borders. People fleeing hunger, conflict created by the West, and in search of better life, which is the EU promises actually. But in reality, what they face is arbitrariness, heartlessness, and violence, which leads to deaths of thousands and hundreds of migrants. And the only way out of this unfortunate situation is the resumption of responsible EU-Belarus cooperation, I mean, involving countries of origin, transit, and destination in order to manage this situation and further risks. Also, I can say that in November this year, Belarus plans to hold an international conference on combating illegal migration in the region, with the invitation of all stakeholders, including neighboring countries and other EU states. And we hope that it will find interest of from other side, and we'll be able to find points for interaction. So you see that we still making efforts to stop the migration without any EU assistance from their side.
So what you're saying is that there used to be a cooperation between the European Union and Belarus before, but they won't cooperate anymore?
Yes, all the projects that of technical assistance that Belarus and the EU countries were involved before the 2021, they have been stopped and suspended by the European side.
So as part of the sanctions?
Yeah, as part of these illegal measures. And
Yeah.
we have no, we just continue to do this work alone.
Okay, we can switch to another topic, perhaps. In the West, Belarus is considered an ally of Russia. But recently, Lukashenko called for an end to the war in Ukraine. This has hardly been reported in Norwegian media. Just a short story from the Norwegian Telegram Bureau, NTB, of August the 16th, says that Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko calls on Russia and Ukraine to end the war so that it does not spread to Belarus. Let's sit down at the negotiating table and put an end to this nonsense, he said. Neither the Ukrainian people, nor the Russians, nor the Belarusians need it. The West need it, says Lukashenko in a 2-hour interview with the Russian radio stations. Of course, the Europeans or the Americans or even some Norwegians don't want us to listen to Russian or Belarusian media. So this is just a short notice in Norwegian media. You have to look sharp to actually see it. So this war in Ukraine continues now and lasted more than nearly 3 years, 2.5 years. Incredible tragedy, hundreds of thousands of deaths and wounded people. And your president asked now that to put an end to this nonsense, he said. Is this a new policy of Belarus?
Yeah, well, this is
to stop the war?
Well, this is not the new policy. Our country leadership continues to tirelessly call for stop of the conflict and early peace talks. And we continue to fulfill our function, our country, as a donor of stability and security in the region. And peace, tolerance, and creation, continue to be among our main values for Belarusians. And I believe that Norwegian citizens are guided by the same basis. Therefore, despite the existing political differences, it is in our common interest to put an end to the Ukrainian conflict as soon as possible. The Norwegian media may have a different agenda at the moment, but it seems that the need for peaceful regulation is clear to all. At the same time, what we're seeing right now, so we are witnessing the opposite processes. The conflict is escalating, including provocations against the territory of Belarus, which our country have to respond to. And at the same time, more than 250,000 citizens of Ukraine have arrived in our country just through Belarusian European border since the beginning of the conflict.
You said that 250,000 Ukrainians have fled to Belarus.
Yes, through Belarus EU border.
Okay.
And we provide to them with all necessary assistance, but instead of gratitude, we receive new illegal restrictions from the West. One can see that this is probably our hypocrisy from from the West, the Western politics look like. And yep.
Yeah, I noticed one Ukrainian parliamentarian. I don't remember his name, but he proposed invading Belarus because he said then the people of Belarus will join the Ukrainian army. What do you say about that?
I would like to emphasize that if conflict expands somehow, so it will cover the entire region, and there will be no winners. So that is why Belarusian side, the Belarusians continue to call Western countries, including Norway, to stop this spiral for escalation and facilitate early peace talks. I can also add that as demonstration of our country's role as promoter of stability and security, Belarus is holding the second high-level international conference on Eurasian security in late October in Minsk. This will be the second conference, and the first one took place last year as well. So it will encompass representatives of political expert and an analytical community from more than 30 countries, also from the Western countries. And the aim of this conference actually is a frank and inclusive discussion of the prospect of the Eurasian security in the context of the crisis of the existing world order and contradictions between its key players and almost complete absence of communication between them right now. So this is our role.
I would like to ask Svetlana Tsikhanovskaya. She warns against Belarus cooperation with Russia, which she believes threatens European security. What is your opinion that, and what is Belarusians' view on her? I mean, I've heard she even encouraged sabotage inside Belarus. How much has this sabotage actually happened?
I can say that from the Western side, maintaining contacts with such extremist groups who claim for committing crimes against Belarus leads to nothing good. It's opposite. And I mean, I think Western leaders should understand this, and I can also add that.
Has there been acts of sabotage, terror that you can link to, that is linked to Tsikhanovskaya? Do you think?
Lead to what?
No, I mean, has there been real occasions of sabotage or maybe terror that is linked to Tsikhanovskaya or something? I heard about some sabotage of railways.
Yeah, well, this I can say that these groups openly promoting such actions.
Yeah, but you don't know any certain.
I have no idea, but because it's law enforcement authorities who investigate such cases. I mean, so it's difficult to comment on that.
we have the case that the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs advises against all travel to Belarus for Norwegian citizens. Due to the sanctions, there are no flights or train connections between Belarus and the EU area. Entry can only be made by private car or bus. So I have to ask you, as a representative for Belarus, are Norwegians welcome, and is it safe to travel to Belarus?
Yeah, I can say that our country has been demonstrating its openness and friendliness since it's gained independence. And visa-free zones in Belarusskaya Pushcha National Park, maybe you know this place, and other locations that people could visit visa-free. I mean, they has been functioning for a long time. And in 2017, citizens of 80 countries were provided with the opportunity to enter Belarus without a visa by plane, also Norwegians. And and this year, Belarus responded to the current illegal restrictions from the West with even greater openness. We introduced visa-free entry for citizens of another 35 European countries through rail and road checkpoints. And as a result, I can say that people who visited our country draw conclusions not all in favor of Western politicians who try to impose various false cliches on Belarus. And since April 2022, almost 1 million citizens of European countries have visited Belarus without a visa. Most of them are our Western neighbors, actually. And here the expression, it is better to see once than to hear 100 times, I think fits here as precisely as possible. And that I can say about the openness of Belarus.
It's better to see than to read.
Yes, and then by now the West has imposed extensive illegal sanctions against a number of Belarusian media and journalists. And a number of EU countries are simply imposing information censorship on our country's media, with indirect blocking of broadcasts. These restrictions do not comply with neither UN Charter nor OEC principles or norms. And following this censorship, even there are a number of cases of persecution of journalists in the European Union. And thus the West as a whole have the right to consider itself, I mean, as the measure of freedoms. I mean, this question is rhetorical.
So Norwegians are welcome to Belarus.
Yeah, because despite the Norwegian advices not to travel to Belarus, you went there earlier this year, Lars.
Yes.
Yeah, and I can add that with visa-free entry, we also see an increase in the interest of Norwegian citizens to travel to Belarus.
Okay.
I mean, therefore, official Norwegian side should recognize that this recommendation to refrain from trips to Belarus does not work, and this recommendation is just does not correspond to reality.
Yeah.
And despite these all artificial obstacles of the West, our people continue contacts, and Norwegians feel at ease in Belarus, including some of your well-known competitors. Maybe you know.
What?
maybe Norwegians feel at ease in Belarus, and also some well-known Norwegian citizens.
You mean like Ole Einar Bjørndalen?
Or for example,
Yeah.
maybe you have seen the article in the Veterans Gang from the last year.
Article about Bjørndalen, you mean?
Yes, in Belarus. Yes.
Yeah. Actually, I tried to. I called him before I went to Belarus, but he was not very willing to talk to me. In fact, but when I went, there was still a requirement for visa. So, I got visa in Vilnius. That was in late June, and so if I had waited a little bit longer, I wouldn't have to require a visa. So now that's a kind of paradox, because the Norwegian government warns Norwegian against traveling to Belarus, but while you say and actually I was there for 4 days, so it was fine for me. I would have liked to be there a little bit longer, in fact, but it didn't happen this time.
I can answer to your question that Norwegian people are always welcome to visit Belarus.
Nice.
In our country.
Good to know. A question: what will it take to improve relations between Belarus and Norway, in your opinion?
I mean, Belarus, we have always stood for the normalization of dialogue with the West, with European Union, as well as with Norway, and bringing together positions and the search for compromise. At the same time, we always proceed from the premise that any dialogue must be based on certain principles. These are first and foremost mutual respect and equality. Equally important is the political will of the other side, something that our Western counterparts is lacking today. And I think simple observance of these basic principles is the right way just to normalize relations. I believe the same also applies to Norway.
Yeah. What have to say about allegations on political prisoners in Belarus, and maybe especially what's the basis for the convict or verdict, or how shall I put it, on Tsikhanovskaya? What's the situation, the legal situation? Can you say something about that?
You know, in Belarusian criminal code, there is no any articles with so-called political crimes, etc., etc. So all these people who the Western countries claim as so-called political prisoners, they all committed real crimes, and I mean, and this is the result of why they have been detained and now in prison. I mean every country, if a person commit a crime, would investigate and then have court proceedings, etc., etc.
Yeah. Yes, of course, there are criminals in Belarus too, like in any other country. But there is a tendency to think that in Norway, there is a tendency to think that certain countries don't have any good reasons for putting people in jail. But of course, there are criminals everywhere. So I guess we can't. Sorry, this is the first podcast in English. I miss words sometimes, but
Never mind.
yeah.
Yeah, because every time the Norwegian press or media will say something about Belarus, they always use the phrase Europe's last dictatorship. That's a standard.
Mm. Yeah.
What you have to say about that?
Yeah. I just said about our openness and a practical state to our openness. And mentioned also how the West measure so-called freedoms. So if the West actually could post itself as I mean, ideal for freedoms, and I mean, this policy of double standards, we insist on put an end to this policy from the West. So, for example, if the EU and the OSCE demand free media for work in Belarus, so let them start with themselves and reconsider the legal decisions to impose restrictive measures on journalists from Belarus, and as well as, I mean, Belarusian media, and just release from prisons people who just have expressed dissenting opinions.
I have to admit, I was kind of, how shall I put it, very surprised, at least when I read, I guess it was, in August, September 2020, that these demonstrations began after the election, and Western media began to say that Tsikhanovskaya was the real winner of the election. And then some months later, I read an opinion by the British Chatham House that told that she only had 4%, that only 4% of the Belarusians actually would have voted for her if she was, because she wasn't even a candidate in the election, wasn't she? So, but it's not actually surprising at all, because the same thing happened in Venezuela when they insisted that Juan Guaido should be the president, even that he wasn't even a candidate for the election. So it's kind of the same situation with Belarus. I think that the Western leaders insist on the person that the Belarusians actually don't want as a president.
I can say that in general, we see that Western press, I mean, often ignores important events for Belarus, but at the same time, there are numerous fakes in Western press, including campaigns to blacken our country. I mean, we react on this quickly and dispelling these lies and tell the whole world the truth. I mean, the other side, if Western media are ready to tell the truth. And Belarus also is not losing momentum in the sphere of media and development, and is building up the most constructive cooperation with its partners in bilateral as well as multilateral platforms on Shanghai Cooperation Organization as well as BRICS.
Yeah.
So we continue to develop.
Yeah.
So we can just summarize a little bit about the sanctions. You said that the sanctions imposed by the EU, that Norway follows as a slave, the sanctions are illegal regarding to international law because it's just the Security Council and the US can impose sanctions against a country. So actually, the EU sanctions and the Norwegian sanctions are illegal.
Yes, correctly.
And because of the sanctions, actually, Belarus' economy are improving, and you find new markets. So the sanctions fails.
Yes, Belarus has successfully rechanneled trade routes to other countries.
Yeah. Okay, so the relations between Belarus and Norway is, of course, very up to the geopolitical situation. You have the war in Ukraine, and Norway is a NATO country and loyal to the US interest and so on. So it's not just two countries. It's Norway on one side of the block and Belarus is on the other. So, but the relations between Belarus and Norway should be good, because you say that we are welcome as tourists or visitors to Belarus. But I don't know, can Belarusians go to Norway without a visa?
No.
No.
As I know, the Norwegian side have not introduced such measures, visa-free measures. But you know, we do not see reciprocity in this way. So we just want to just that people in Western countries and in Norway just to see what how Belarus really treats I mean other countries. We're open to dialogue. We're open to visit our country. So, and this is really practical step. This was really practical step to open border for Europeans, because yeah, I mean, Western politicians are tending not to say in the real picture, but I mean, visiting Belarus, coming to Belarus, I mean, it's I mean, the best way to see the real life in the country.
Yeah.
Yes, I think we can conclude with that. Go see yourself, as I did earlier this year, and many other Norwegians have done. So that's the best way, I think, because I found out that our media paints often a bad picture of other countries that is part of the politics. So then again, go see yourself, Belarus or any other countries.
Yeah, that's a good summary, Lars. I think I would say thank you for the conversation here on Spartacus.no. Yaraslau Martsinkevich, Chargé of Belarus to Sweden and Norway.
Thank you, Mr. Alnes. Thank you, Mr. Bickelin.
Thank you to Lars.
Yes, it was a pleasure.
Yeah,
to be with you in this conversation.
So then, hopefully, we will be back with a new episode in the near future. And thank you for watching.
Thank you.